Okay, so it's a new class today, but it's kind of like a continuation. That's the truth. We're in the middle of a narrative in the Gemara. Page Chafei Amud Beis, 25b. The Gemara is talking about the kindling of Shabbos candles. And really what we learned in our previous class was that there is more to Shabbat candles than just having the function of light and not tripping over your feet. If we could sum it up in a word, the Shabbat candles add an ambiance and an atmosphere. And the Gemara wants to demonstrate and prove this, that there's an element of preparation for Shabbos which is not only technical or functional. It goes beyond the actual details of lighting a candle, but what puts us into the environment and atmosphere of Shabbos. And the Gemara said like this. The Gemara said that Rav Nachman bar Zavda, and others said it was Rav Nachman bar Rava, who said in the name of Rav, that had lokas ner b'Shabbos chayva, and rechitzes yadayim v'raglayim b'chamen be'arvis reshus. So the Gemara wanted to emphasize that the notion of having the candles lit is more than just the technical side of things, but rather it's an actual chayva, and it's a chayva to sit at the table with those candles, and it's a chayva to enjoy the atmosphere of Shabbos. And that the other things we do to prepare for Shabbos are only reshus. And the Gemara went on to say, V'ani oimer, and I say mitzvah. It's not just a reshus, but in fact it's a mitzvah. And he says, what does it mean, a mitzvah? A mitzvah usually means something which is incumbent upon us. And here it certainly doesn't mean that it's a mitzvah. That's what the Gemara asks, my mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to bathe before Shabbos. It's a commandment in the Torah. You have to make a bracha before you bathe before Shabbos. So he says, I'll tell you what I mean when I say mitzvah. The Omar Rabbi Yehuda, Omar Rav. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. And of course everybody asks the question. Rav said it's a reshus. And now Rav Nachman wants to prove it's a mitzvah. And how does he prove that it's a mitzvah? Because Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav. so it's all from Rav. So the Machzor Bracha says what really happening here is Rav Nachman is elucidating the story. He said the story is not just a reshus, it's not just elective, but the story we're really hearing here is the idea of a mitzvah. But by mitzvah, not a literal mitzvah. It means a mitzvah which is a minig Yisrael. A mitzvah means it's appropriate, it's correct, it's the right thing to do. That the way that Yidden, the way the Jewish people behave towards Shabbos, that's the meaning of mitzvah.
Was in the definition of the 613 mitzvahs?
Not within the definition of the 613 mitzvahs, not even in the definition of the 7 rabbinic mitzvahs, not even in the definition of a mitzvah and meaning as an incumbent, but rather in a minhag tov, in an appropriate behavior. That's the meaning of mitzvah. The Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav, this was minhagoi shel Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, this was the custom of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Eloi, that Erev Shabbos, Mevi'in le'areva m'le'acham, and they would bring a tub of boiled water. In those days, they didn't have a tap where you can simply turn on the shower, so it was a big deal to bathe. And they would bring in this tub of hot water, and v'reichitz pon of yadav v'raglov, he would wash himself, u'misatef, and then he would wrap himself, v'yeshiv, he would sit down, v'sadinim, in these linen sheets, hamutzuyotzin, which were tzitzis, betzitzitz. They were fringed with tzitzis. V'doimel malach Hashem's voice, and he would appear like a malach Hashem's voice. We have this language of the Gemara in numerous places. It says that Talmud Tisch of Bavel, that the sages of Babylon used to look like a malach, and the idea of the malach, I guess, was dressed in white and wrapped in tzitzis, like a talis of sorts. V'hoyu talmidov mechaben mimenu mipnei kamfek susan, but his disciples, they would hide from before him because of the way their tassels were, the corners of their garments, which it seems did not have tzitzis. This is kind of where we left off last week. So the proof that we brought, that the sitting next to the candles, or having the candles at the table, enjoying the atmosphere of Shabbos, a mitzvah, we brought actual proof from this, right? Like this was because we see that there's a discussion whether or not bathing is a reshus or maybe bathing is a mitzvah, but the candles are choiva. So choiva means obligatory and means creating that atmosphere and spending the Shabbat meal in eye shot of the candles together with basking in the glow of the candles. That's actually obligatory. And this goes back to the original question as to why certain fuel could not be used to kindle the Shabbos candles, and the answer was because it had a foul smell, and a foul smell would mean people would leave, and if people would leave, they wouldn't bask in the glory and the beauty and the atmosphere of Shabbos, and that wouldn't be a good thing. I've essentially repeated a lot of what we talked about before, adding a few nuances. And I promised you last week that I would clarify this business of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi sitting, wrapped in these linen garments, linen sheets, really, with tzitzis, and his Talmidim sitting without tzitzis. So what is going on over here? Now you know that the Gemara oftentimes will introduce a subject, we'll talk about a subject, and that will lead us to a tangent to another subject. And it's like life itself. Life just happens. And the Gemara just happens. The Gemara can't say, oh, we're not talking about that now. Now we're only going to stay focused on the subject at hand. But the Gemara is not like a lecture. The Gemara is like life, and it may meander. And it requires a vast knowledge of many, many different things, because as the conversation will continue to meander and move on, all kinds of things will come into play. And if you're reading the Gemara and you're not in the know, not informed, you end up stumbling and tripping because what is going on here? So let me clarify for you what's going on here. There's a background that you need to be aware of. And once you'll understand this background, then you'll be able to appreciate how the Gemara ends up with a discussion of, yes, tassels, no tassels. Why was it that the Rebbe was sitting with tzitzis and the Talmidim were sitting without tzitzis, but they were ashamed they were sitting without tzitzis? There seemed to be some kind of dispute or disagreement. If they were Talmidim of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, they're not wearing tzitzis. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to have these tassels. I mean, what is going on here? So before I go into the details of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi's yes tzitzis, no tzitzis, I want to share three things with you. The Maharal of Prague brings down that the idea of sitting with tzitzis is the concept of what he calls, quote, kavod reish, which means seriousness. Shabbos is not a frivolous day. Shabbos is a joyous day, but it's not a joke. And Shabbos has to be taken seriously. That is to say, when you're at a wedding and the bride comes, people rise. People show a certain respect. It's not a funeral. It's a wedding. It's a happy time. People are glad to be there, but nonetheless, there is a very, very strong element of respect that punctuates the crowds and the proceedings, especially when it comes to the chuppah. So that's how Shabbos is not a casual time. It's a time of rest and serenity, but it's not casual, and therefore we have the Gemara that talks about greeting Shabbat like greeting royalty. Rambam in Mishnah Torah in the end of Hilchos Shabbos and Perek Lamed, he talks about the idea of Shabbos HaMelech, of Shabbos like greeting a king, greeting a royal, and this royal arrival is something that everybody's anticipating and in awe of. Elsewhere it's talked about as a malka. Rambam really is the only one who speaks about a melech. Everybody else speaks about a malka, like a queen. And the queen arrives, and everybody is awestruck by her beauty and her halo, and it's a serious business. So Shabbos' arrival is not supposed to come when everybody's slouching, when everybody's chilling or relaxing. Shabbos' arrival, you shouldn't be on edge, you shouldn't be yelling and screaming, people shouldn't be unhappy, but people should be in an elevated state like you're at a chuppah. There's a sense of awe, a sense of respect. And that's called kavod reish. And the truth is, the last one to talk about this, but really, real Shmira Shabbos means that you enter into Shabbos in a Shabbostic mode. Not that you're running till the last second and till the last millisecond you're doing something and then you collapse. Shabbos means to come into Shabbos, to plan, to know when Shabbos is coming and be ready for Shabbos and to approach Shabbos appropriately. That means real Shmira Shabbos. And that's why our sages made a point of bathing. You greet a royal. People you're going to a wedding. You're going to bathe before. You want to look your best. You want to fit in with the rest of the crowd. And then he would wrap himself in a talis. And a talis reminds us, of course, of the Shechina, like the Balei Tosfos say that the tchelis of the tzitzis reflect the color of the sea. The sea is a reflection of the heavens. The heavens remind us of God's presence. There's an element, a very strong element of being aware of Hashem's presence when one is wrapped in such a talis. And that is what he was trying to, in effect, bring about. Now, maybe because of this dispute of ksus yoyim and ksus laila, which we're soon going to talk about, day garment, night garment, is there an appropriate time to wear tzitzis or not? So the only time we actually put on a talis as at the arrival of a particular day is the eve of Yom Kippur. And we wear a talis, that's the only time we wear it before. But otherwise, we don't wear a talis before. And the Rambam doesn't talk about a talis, and the Shulchan Aruch certainly doesn't talk about it, but it talks about wearing your finery. That's why Hasidic Yidden wear not just regular clothes, Shabbos clothes, markedly different Shabbos clothes. The Polish Hasidim or the Hungarian Hasidim wear a shteimel or a spodik, wearing a silk kaftan. It looks different. It's not a regular day. When people dress a certain way, it affects them. It makes a difference. So Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi would prepare himself. He would bathe himself, and it's brought down that people should go to mikveh before Shabbos, and they would dress in Shabbos finery, and then he would gather his students, and they would together wait for the coming of the Shabbos. The Gemara talks about going out into the fields and say, let us greet Shabbos HaMalka. In the holy city of Tzfat, the Arizal famously used to lead his disciples into an apple orchard, proverbial at least, called Chakal Tapuch and Kadishin, and they would go out to the hills and they would greet the Shabbos. And there's this tremendous atmosphere. It's tremendous event is about to unfold now. And Reb Shlomo Alkabatz, the author of the hymn L'Chadodi, which is sang virtually in all congregations, he encapsulates and captures this mood, this atmosphere, in his famous hymn in the L'Chadodi, which is L'Chadodi L'Krat Kala, Pnei Shabbat L'Kabla. So it's Pnei Shabbat. We're greeting the face of Shabbos, welcoming Shabbos. So Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi is wearing these white garments, which is, we have this idea evoking imagery, angelic imagery, and he's wearing a talis, which is Keved Reish.
And or does the
I don't know if and or only, but it sounds like he's wrapping himself in sheets which are tzitzit.
No,
okay, they have.
I
know what it says. Hamitzuyatzin.
That means that the sadin was mitzuyatzin.
Yes, correct. The
Not
linen
that he was
sheets.
wearing something else.
I didn't say wearing a talis. The linen sheets that he was wearing had tzitzis on them. Mm-hmm. There were four-cornered linen sheets, and this is how he would prepare for Shabbos. Now the Talmidim are sitting before him, and they're also wrapped in Shabbos clothes. However, they're a little ashamed, and they don't have tzitzis on their linen sheets that they're wearing, that they're wrapped in. So the Gemara records now this episode where there's this exchange between Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi and his disciples. Omer Lahen, he says, Bonai, my children, which is, of course, you know that whenever in Torah we have the description of children or parents, it refers to a Talmud and a Rebbe. So he says, Bonai, Lo kach shenisi lechem. Did I not teach you the halacha? That sadin b'tzitzis, that if you have a linen garment with tzitzis, Beis Shammai poitrim, Beis Shammai says you're exempt from putting tzitzis. Ubeis Hillel mechayven, and Beis Hillel says you're obligated. V'halacha kedivrei Beis Hillel, and the halacha, the ruling is like the words of Beis Hillel. So why aren't you wearing tzitzis? What's going on here? We all want to wear these linens, actually where the term linen comes from, because they were linen sheets. Linens were linen for whatever reason. Maybe because they were smooth or they had a certain property to them that was desirable, that made them flat. I don't know, but that's what they're wearing. He's wearing these linen sheets. So if you're wearing linen, he says, did we not discuss this already? What is going on here? Here I am wrapped in linens, and I have tzitzis. You're wrapped in linens, you don't have tzitzis. We know there's a dispute, and the halacha is like Beis Hillel. So where's your tzitzis? So the Gemara says, V'inhu savri, they were of the opinion, Gzeira mishum ksuslayla, that there was a decree lest it be a night garment. That is the little translation, which of course does not make any sense. So let's move together to Rashi. And as we will explain this Rashi, I think that I'll be able to clarify. You should understand where exactly this conversation went. Rashi says, B'siyodin, Besadinim, hamitzuyatzin. Sadinim shel pishtan. These were linens, or sheets made of linen. Ubahem, and in them were tzitzis shel tcheles. Tcheles is a special turquoise or purple-green wool, which is dyed in a special manner, and that's a whole subject for another class. What is tcheles? What is not tcheles? We don't have tcheles with certainty today. Have at least 2 forms, maybe 3 forms of tcheles, and there are disputes that continue to rage about this. But at any rate, really tzitzit is supposed to have white strings and a blue thread. It's supposed to have both, and it's called tcheles. But the halacha is that tcheles can only be made of wool. Tcheles has to be dyed wool. Every material, when you dye it, it dyes differently.
So we've got shatnez.
So we have shatnez, correct. Shatnez, of course, is the forbidden mixture that the Torah does not allow linen and wool, flax, and that which comes from the back of a sheep together. So we don't have plant and animal life, so to speak, mixed. And this goes back to the original dispute between Cain and Abel, where Cain brought flax seeds from which linen is spun, and Hevel brought sheep, and there's a lot to say about that. But at any rate, the Torah prohibits it. And here we have a problem, because the tzitzis require tcheles, and the tcheles has to be wool. And because it has to be wool, when you have somebody wearing a garment which is made of linen, and the tzitzis could also be made of linen, that's fine. Because the tzitzis have to be min hakonaf, the fringes have to be made of the same material as the garment itself. But the tcheles, but that special blue wool, that has to be made of wool. It can't be made of any other substance. So this is kilayim. This is a forbidden mixture. So if it's a forbidden mixture, then how in heaven do you fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis when you're wearing a linen garment? And the Rashi tells us, the darshinan elashamuter min haTorah. It's permissible. The Torah permits this kind of forbidden mixture. How and why would the Torah permit this forbidden mixture? The Torah doesn't say, don't mix wool and linen except for. Torah just says, flat out, don't mix wool and linen. So, how do you know it's permissible? And the answer is, the darshinan smuchim. Because we expound and we say, well, we look at one pasuk next to the other pasuk. The one pasuk, one verse says, Lo tilbash shatnez. Don't mix that which is spun or fastened together, made of wool and linen. And the very next pasuk says, Gidilim tasalacha, fringes or tassels you should fashion for yourself. So because we have Gidilim tasalacha, and because we have this mitzvah in the Torah that says, don't wear the wool and linen, and because they're side by side, so we learn from this that one is not permitted to mix wool and linen with the exception of fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis. That's when it would be permissible. Okay, so if it's permissible, what's the issue? Well, there's an issue. And the issue goes like this. Rashi says, Mechavin mimenu mipnei ksusan. They were hiding from before him, a little ashamed. Shahayu lehem sadinim shenim mitzuyatzin. They were sitting in front of him with sheets that did not have tzitzis. I must tell you that according to many opinions, many of the Rishonim, it doesn't mean they didn't have tzitzis at all. It means they didn't have tchelas. They had white tzitzis, but didn't have the blue thread. Although there are some opinions that didn't have tzitzis at all. And we'll soon see how that works out according to the different opinions.
Well, are the tzitzis valid without the...
Are tzitzis valid without the blue string? Well, we all wear tzitzis without the blue string.
In those days when they knew what the tchelet was, we wear it without the tchelet because we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, but
we don't know what tchelet is.
But not knowing what tchelet is does not make it okay if it's not okay. In other words, if the Torah says that you can't wear white strings without a blue string, the fact that we don't know what tcheles is or don't have tcheles doesn't make it a mitzvah. If you don't have an etrog on Sukkot, you do not use potatoes. And you don't even use a tangerine, right? So if there's no mitzvah of having white threads without a blue thread, it makes no difference whether the blue thread is available or not available. If there's no mitzvah of having a white thread without a blue thread, then even if the blue thread is not available, there would be no mitzvah, period. So even though... How do we deal with it? We deal with it because there is a mitzvah. Our tradition says there is a mitzvah to have the white threads without the blue thread. Now, when we have a situation where we're going to be mixing wool and linen together, that's good cause or reason to leave the blue wool out, because you're still doing a mitzvah, namely the mitzvah of the white threads. Now, there is another opinion that they didn't have tzitzis at all, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's take this through like piece by piece. So, Beis Shammai poitrin. The Gemara said Beis Shammai exempts. What does it mean, Beis Shammai poitrin? V'af al gaf, the tzitzis choyvahi, even though tzitzis is obligatory. B'chol talisois sheyesh le'lo adam, if a person has garments, those garments have four corners, then there is a mitzvah. It's mandatory. It's not elective. It's not, well, if I want, I can have fringes. And if I don't want, well, I won't have fringes. Wrong. If you have a garment that has four corners, you're obligated to put fringes. You're not obligated to have garments that have four corners. But if you have four corners, you're obligated to put tzitzis, to put these tassels, these fringes. And the Rashi says, afilu munachim b'kufsa. Even if this garment is folded up and put in your armoire or dresser, it makes no difference. You're not allowed to keep such tzitzis in your house even. So the Gemara says, Hani the pishtan peturim. Despite the fact that all else is obligated, these of linen would have been exempt. Why? Beis Shammai was of the opinion, Mishum de Kilayim Loishara Rachamana, because the Torah did not permit you to mix wool and linen. And because the Torah did not permit you to mix wool and linen, and because tzitzis necessarily have to be made of wool, that's why you're exempt from tzitzis. Well, how do we know otherwise? Because Beis Hillel is doirish smuchim. Beis Hillel says that it's meaningful when verses are attached to one another, when they're conjoined to one another, when they're back to one another, that does teach us something. Beis Shammai says not necessarily. So here we don't know what to do. Torah says don't do this. You say, but maybe you could do it. Well, maybe you could do it is not good enough. I know the Torah said for sure is explicitly wrong. I know it's wrong. And unless I know that smuchim are meant to be expounded upon or built upon, Rabbi Shammai says, I can't put tzitzis here. I'm exempt. I don't know what to do. Now again, this would follow two opinions. If there's an opinion that you could put white without the blue, and that's what they were doing, they were putting the white without the blue, even though they had the blue threads. Beis Hillel Mechayif, and Beis Hillel says you're absolutely mandated to have tzitzis because the psukim are juxtaposed. They're in close proximity, and therefore that in and of itself is a meaningful message. So Rebbe Yehuda Bar Eloi is looking at his disciples and says, I don't understand what's going on here. Yes, we're wearing linen. Yes, that's how we prepare for Shabbos. I'm wearing tzitzis. You're not wearing tzitzis. I told you. This is a dispute. There are two schools of thought, both true Torah schools of thought, but there's a halacha. There's Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, two approaches. The halacha is like Beis Hillel, that we are supposed to have tzitzis. Where's your tzitzis? Why aren't you wearing tassels? So the Gemara says, "Ve'inhu savri," because if they were of the opinion, meaning Talmidav, the disciples of Rebbe Yehuda Bar Eloi, shehoyu oisrin savor, that they thought that nehida halacha ke Beis Hillel, that even though the halacha is like Beis Hillel, v'chayovim midiraisa, and biblically one indeed is obligated. Mihu rabbanon gazabahu. They said nonetheless they were of the opinion that the rabbis would have made an injunction b'shum ksus laila, because of a night garment. What does it mean, a night garment? So about tzitzis it says that you see the tzitzis and then you remember. We have this tradition that because of that, tzitzis you're only obligated to wear during the day and you're not obligated to wear during the night. Now the truth is it's not so simple, because it doesn't say you're not obligated to wear tzitzis at night. It says a ksus laila. And a ksus laila means a night garment, means clothing worn only at night. It's simply pajamas would not be night garments, because in today's day and age, in countries like ours, where the sun comes up in the summer, not in the afternoon, when the sun comes up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 5:15 in the morning, and people are sleeping till 7 or till 8, that's not a ksus laila, it's a ksus yom. They're sleeping part of the time during the day. And if you have teenagers in the house, I mean, forget about it. And all pajamas are ksus yom, right? Because before they see the light of day already, that's not so simple. But they said the concern was shema yehelei ksus shemiyuchad leleilis. Maybe there might be a garment which is only worn at nights. In those days, they didn't sleep during the day. They weren't awake during the night. They slept. When it was dark, they slept. For the most part, you had nothing else to do. They didn't have a flick of a switch of light. So v'yatel boi tzitzis. Maybe you're going to have a garment which is meant for the night only, and you'll place tzitzis, you'll fasten tzitzis, and then v'nimtza levish kilayim. Then will turn out that you're actually violating a commandment of the Torah, because this garment that you put the tzitzis into is not obligated to have tzitzis. And if it's not obligated, it's not permitted to mix wool and linen. And because you would be doing this, it's only because of mokem mitzvah, only because of the mitzvah of tzitzis. But ksus lailo loy mechayev, the ksus lailo doesn't have, it's not loy mischayev b'tzitzis. The chsiv, it says ureisa, so you have to see it. And in the Gemara in Yevamos, Rashi says, the Gemara says, what, the rabbis can uproot a mitzvah from the Torah? And the Gemara says, yeah, it could. Ishav al tasa, the rabbis can tell you, stand down. Don't do this. So this was the discussion. This is a dispute. And I said there's two shittas in the Shainim. One shittas in the Shainim is that the discussion was about the tchelas. That was the discussion. Whether the blue thread was there. And Rebbe Yehuda Bar Eloi, who lived a perfect life and there was no concern and did everything right, he didn't believe that there could be a concern that you have to worry about doing the wrong thing. But his Talmidim were living in the ground. They knew that people confuse things. And therefore they were of the opinion that no, it's true the halacha is like Beis Hillel, but ultimately the rabbi said don't put the blue thread into the tzitzis, the garment which is made of linen, because you're going to end up at some point violating something. So they're only wearing white threads. But they were ashamed because the Rebbe ruled otherwise. So they kind of were uncomfortable. They were hiding themselves. They were wrapped, but hiding themselves. And he was wrapped, and he noticed, and he has a conversation with them. And the upshot of this whole piece of Gemara is that Maseches Shabbos has nothing to do per se with blue threads or with tzitzis or with a talis. But Maseches Shabbos is talking about the lighting of Shabbos candles. And from the lighting of Shabbos candles, we do come to speak about the atmosphere of Shabbos. And from this, we do come to speak about how a person should greet the Shabbos. And therefore, it's meaningful. And that's how this conversation kind of it unwinds and unfolds. And when you learn Gemara, you learn about all kinds of things. And that, my dear friends, is how this Gemara makes its conclusion. And before the Gemara concludes, the Gemara now continues. And the Gemara says, okay, so now, since we talked about atmosphere, and since we talked about the feeling of Shabbos, and since we talked specifically about how Shabbat candles are able to transform and make us feel in a mood that sets the tone for Shabbos, so the Gemara now brings a drasha, which is based on a lament of the great prophet Jeremiah, who wrote, of course, a Megillah, a scroll called Eicha, also known as Kinos in some places. And the Megillah's Eicha, in which Yirmiyahu, prophet Jeremiah, is Mekoinen, in which he laments the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. So in the 3rd chapter, he laments all kinds of awful things that happened to our ancestors upon the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and Yerushalayim and Eretz Yisrael and the resultant exilic dispersion of the Jewish people. And he says, in the 17th verse, he says, Vatiznach misholem nafshi. Nashisi toiva. The word haznacha means neglected. So peace has neglected me. Peace has abandoned me. Nashisi toiva. Goodness was torn away from me, I'm bereft of goodness. So this is different than the rest of the verses. This is different because the rest of the verses speak about bad things that happened. And here it's not talking about something bad that happened. Here it's talking about the loss of something good I used to have. It's not a bad situation because of something negative that unfolded. It's because of something that was missing. And because it's something that was missing, the Gemara has to expound on this and say, what does it mean? What was it that was missing that was so lamentable? The Gemara asks, "Mai vatiznach nafshi, vatiznach mishalom nafshi." What does it mean that peace neglected my soul? What does that mean? What does it mean specifically? I mean, exile is not a state of peace. Being torn away from Eretz Yisrael, losing your home, none of these things are peaceful per se. Nobody would say, "Oh, how was your peaceful galus? How was it when they burned the Beis HaMikdash? Was that nice? How'd that go? How'd that go when they slaughtered like 1 million people in Yerushalayim? How was it? Was it peaceful?" You're a lunatic. Like, what kind of question is that? So if it's not a question, then why does Yirmiyahu have to make a statement like that? Peace abandoned me. Peace neglected me. What peace? None of this is peaceful per se. It's like saying, how was the battlefield? It wasn't peaceful. You don't say. So we're in a battlefield here. And here we have 3 verses for every letter of the Aleph Beis. So here in the 17th verse, corresponding to the letter Vav, we have this business of peace being neglected or robbed of peace not being missing, and the Gemara says, what does this mean? So the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Avohu. Rabbi Avohu says, Zoi hadlokas ner Shabbos. This, my dear friends, refers to the kindling of the Shabbos candles. Says Rashi, hadlokas ner Shabbos, shalehoyoloi mimala hadlik. They didn't even have fuel to light Shabbos candles. Forget food. They didn't have fuel. They didn't even have candles. Ubemokim she'ein ner. And where there is no candle, in shalom there can be no peace. Sha'hoilech v'nichshol, because a person goes and stumbles. V'hoilech ba'afela, he's groping his way through the darkness. Of course, you could ask the obvious question, was this only on Friday night that they were groping in darkness? If you don't have a candle, so it's every night you're groping in darkness. And the Mefarshim say, look, on a regular day of the week, there could be a candle that's shared. If you need something, you get the candle, you get the lamp. You navigate your way through the house, but on Shabbos, you can't do that. So on Shabbos, you can't hold a lamp or lantern or candle lest it extinguish. So there has to be a candle in each room, and that nobody could afford. So Friday night became a night of gloom for the Jewish people. It used to be a time of light and a time of peace and a time of serenity and spirituality, a time in which everybody was uplifted, and now it became a time in which their spirits were dashed and in which everybody sat in darkness and gloom. And that's the meaning of a tiznach mishalom nafshi. There's a beautiful interpretation that's brought down about this, that there's a Gemara that says there was a time the Parsiim decreed that at particular junctures no flames or candles could be lit unless it was an expression of idolatrous deity, and anybody who would light candles outside of the house of the idol worship could be put to death. So the people had no choice. They couldn't light these candles. So it's not just a question of no fuel, but they were robbed of Shabbos. Robbed them of Shabbos. There's many interesting stories about the Moranos, these Jews who didn't have the courage to pick up and leave everything behind and remained in Spain and were called conversos, and new Jews, and they would go to the basement to light candles because it's Friday night. So light basement and candles. And I was told a story many years ago that there was a Jewish girl backpacking in Europe. This was somewhere in the mid-60s. And she was not very observant. But her family lit candles Friday, and she ended up kind of like hooking up with this Spanish girl from somewhere in South America. And they were backpacking, and she said, listen, I'm going to do something funny, but it's Friday night. Hope you don't mind. In our hostel, I'm going to have tea lights, about little candles. I'm going to light some candles. And this girl from South America, Spanish girl, is like astounded. You light candles also, she said. I said, what do you mean? She says, we have this thing, we go in the basement to light candles. She was clearly descended, and today it's been proven. There's more Jewish blood in many of these Spanish, Portuguese refugees that came to Brazil or Argentina, specifically Brazil. There's more Jewish blood there than Elizabeth Warren has Indian blood or Aboriginal blood. I mean, there's these people, many of them really came from a Jewish past. Many of these people, by the way, are returning today. They're called the Bnei Anusim. It's a whole movement. So they kept some customs. And some of these people didn't even know why they were doing this, but they knew on Friday night to go into the basement of the house and to light candles. They didn't even know why. So lighting candles has always been the thing that sets the tone for Yidden on Friday night. And here Yirmiyahu says, for the first time in their history, tiznach mishalom nafshi. When they felt the gullus, when they really felt robbed of their peace, even if they were still in their own homes, when Friday night came around. This was the real gullus. When Friday night comes and a Yid can't feel Shabbos, this is gullus. This is being robbed of peace. So really think about, what does this teaching convey to you? It says far more than just the functionality of the Shabbos candles. It ultimately gives us a sense that the Shabbos candles provide us with a sense of peace, to the point that when the Shabbos candles aren't around, it's like peace has left our souls. Like a piece of us is gone. We're not who we could be. We're not. Something is missing, and to the point that Yirmiyahu laments it on behalf of the Jewish people. Now, once the Gemara talked about the beginning of this pasuk for obvious reasons, and it's connected to what we're discussing here, the Gemara goes on and expounds the rest of the verse. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, "Zay beis hamerchetz." This is getting a good shower. You could put up with all kinds of things, but when you can't wash, you can't bathe.
Isn't he just opposing between the two? Zoad lakat ner b'Shabbat, and Rabbi Yirmiyahu Omer no.
Well, really, the Gemara now is continuing. The Gemara says, what does the rest of the verse mean? The verse means nashisi toiva. What does it mean? Nashisi toiva. What does it mean? I was stripped of good. So the Gemara says they weren't able to wash. They weren't able to have beis hamerchetz. Rabbi Yechonah says rechitzas yadayim v'raglayim b'chamen. No, it does refer to Shabbos, and it refers to the bath they would take before Shabbos. It refers once again to how they would bathe themselves to greet the Shabbos, the aura of Shabbos. Amar Rabbi Avohu. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Amar Zumitana v'kelim noim shaleh. This refers to a beautiful couch, which this is in the time in antiquity when they would not sit at a table, but rather they would dine at couches. And they would have these low little tables that were kind of like on the floor, but the main thing was the bed or the couch, not the table. Today it's the other way around. And actually the Ramah says that it's a mitzvah to put a mappa, a tablecloth on the table. That's how we make the house look Shabbosdik. And he says whether you're eating at home or not eating at home, there always has to be a tablecloth that's placed. That tablecloth means Shabbos. That's what tablecloth means. But this, in those days, it was spreading this bedspreads or special sheets on the bed to make the house look like it was Shabbos. Rabbi Abba Amar, this is a mitim mutzas ve'isham mikushetes l'talmidei chachamim. This refers to the one's wife that's dressed beautifully for Shabbos. And there's much discussion, much hay about this business of isham mikushetes. It could be understood on a literal level. However, many of the Mefarshim explain this on a non-literal level as well. Rabbi Akiva says that, what is the meaning? He says, what is an usher? We're soon going to say, what is wealth? He says, Kol sheyesh li isha noah b'maaseh, a person who has a good wife, which means a wife with the right values. This is similar to the idea of sheker achein v'hevel hayofi, that beauty is naught, that's meaningless if it's not backed up with content, if it's not backed up with values. So it's all about values ultimately. And then there are others who maintain that this refers not only to one's wife, but really it refers to men and women equally, and the wife here, the Isha Mekushetes, is referring to the Neshama. So the Neshama has to be dressed beautifully, the Neshama has to be prepared, and when the Neshama is in the right spot, so then the body falls into step with that as well, and a person is ready to greet Shabbos. And ultimately all of this is connected to Shabbos then. So we see that the concept of Shabbos very much has to do with atmosphere, with mood, with preparation, from candles to bedspreads or kelim noim, or nice things on the table, to the concept of having your family, everybody dressed beautifully, everybody ready to greet the Shabbos, and down to the idea of the neshama being in its right place. And when we see this, because right after we talk about this Isha Mikushetes now, the Gemara says, since we talked about this drasha of Atiznach Meshalom Nafshi, and since we have different opinions as to what exactly that means, so the Gemara says that there are also different opinions as to what is called wealth, what is called affluence. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbi said, Ezeu Asher, and here we start going into a discussion, what is affluence, what is wealth, what is prosperity, because we all know that there are lots of people who have money but are not happy, and maybe not even affluent. There's a famous singer named Bob Marley. He's a smart guy. He said, some people are so poor, all they have is money. So the Gemara is going to have a discussion about this. Everything is in Torah already, right? The Torah talks about what is wealth. So the Gemara is going to talk about this, and now once we talked about the good fortune of being able to welcome Shabbos, the Gemara is going to come back and discuss the concept of what wealth is, and that is to be continued.